Meeting. I would like to welcome, as we always do, starting from right to left, Patty Calderoni, our teacher rep Andrew McMenamin, Andrew, Chuck, Susan, Mr. Batchelor, Dr. Rabarczyk, and welcome Ed Diazio as our solicitor here today. Let's get started with the administrative remarks. Dr. Rabarczyk.
Sure. Just to start off in regards to questions, as always, at the last policy meeting there were several questions about the process and procedures followed during the recent board meetings. In both meetings the board followed all appropriate policies in setting the agenda and approval of pertinent motions. So that responds to all of those questions that were kind of lumped together. In regards to what we're doing tonight, we're looking at a number of policies. We're looking at Policy 251, homeless students, and Policy 810, transportation. Both of those are coming forward for final review and hopefully moving on to the March regular business meeting agenda for second read and adoption. We're also looking at Policy 206, assignments within district, and Policy 218.2, terroristic threats. And then finally we'll be looking at a booster club policy development communication plan that Mr. Petiti will be here to present that piece. In regards to policy and some of the updates, I collaborated with the district administrators regarding the school bus stop policy that we discussed and whether or not we believed at this time that was necessary. The group did review that, the sample that we had, and looked at our transportation policy and felt at this time it was not needed, that our transportation policy did contain the information necessary. Also, we are, in regards to the field trip administrative regulations, I'm currently working with Mr. Diazio and our building administrators as we move forward in developing a comprehensive administrative regulations. So we feel as though this document will be finalized prior to our April meeting, and then that will be communicated to our staff and administration, and then as well as posted on our website. This was something that came about in regards to just setting up systems and communication for policy. I'm going to work over the next month and with the collaboration of the committee to develop a flow chart for policy that will establish a precise approach to how policy is developed and the steps that it takes to, once it goes to the first read, the second read, once it's adopted, who it goes to, and how we're communicating that out to all the necessary stakeholders. And then finally, the Wellness Committee met on Thursday, March 1st, and Ms. Stern was there as well, so if I miss anything, Susan, feel free to jump in. But at that meeting there was representation from school board administration, both central and building. There was support and professional staff members, as well as food service, a certified school nurse, as well as community members. So the topics that we discussed were basically that PDE does an assessment of the policy every 3 years. We noted that the annual report on our wellness policy will be reported out on an annual basis, and that will be through board minutes in order to get it out to the public in regards to the fulfilling the obligations of that policy. It was also discussed that the AR could include other topics, which we, in regards to mental health, our wellness policy, our wellness curriculum, and other areas surrounding health and wellness that we want to maybe include as part of what we see as a district as part of wellness, but not specific to that policy, what needs to be in there based on federal regulations. So what we concluded with was that Dr. Kane and myself will be reviewing other district policies, and we will determine that specific verbiage for policy 272, and then we'll reconvene the Wellness Committee at a later time to review that proposed language and determine how we're going to proceed.
Does anybody have any administrative remarks? Does anybody have any administrative remarks? Questions? I just wanted to...
So, real quick, Susan, did I miss anything that you can think of offhand? I hate to put you on the spot, but...
No, it's fine.
No, it's fine. The context for the wellness committee discussion with regard to the policy is that when we reviewed the wellness policy here in committee, the question was raised at the committee level here did we want to expand the meaning for wellness? And so I brought that question to the wellness committee to say, does the committee want to expand the meaning of wellness? It has a very particular limit in the policy as outlined by federal law. And the discussion went on, and I think, Tony, you summed it up well. You and Dr. Kane are going to give that some thought. If the definitions for wellness that we provide for in our curriculum, mental health, social, emotional, if all of those things are in our curriculum and are covered under other policies, there's not a compelling reason to bring them into the wellness policy, and there's actually a consideration to not constrain ourselves by writing about it in more policies. So it was more of a question I brought to them to consider. We're in the midst of considering, and when there's something to bring back, we will.
And for Andrew's benefit, I just wanted him to know he was not on the board when we reviewed the wellness policy recently, but the wellness policy mandates that we have a wellness committee. So therefore, that's why there was a meeting. And
Thank you.
they will do much to inform any future changes to the wellness policy that we have on the books. I had a quick question about the admin remarks. The field trip AR, I think I heard, and I could have misheard, but Dr. McGuigan said at the curriculum committee meeting that you would be mentioning that in your admin remarks, and I think she said something having to do with funding, which I don't think the AR is going to cover at this point, right?
Correct.
So I just want to make sure, if I heard that correctly, that we correct that here.
Yes, we are not talking about funding in the field trip AR. That'll be brought up strictly through finance,
right,
and how that will be addressed. But the AR is more of the procedures of how field trips will be carried out and the process of approving that.
Okay, terrific. And that'll be by April. Okay, super. With that, if no one has any other comments on the administrative remarks, let's look at our minutes from last month's meeting. Does anybody have changes, comments, or ready to approve those?
No, they're fine.
Okay, great. So let's move past that. We have minutes approved. And on to, we're going to make a slight change in the agenda due to some time constraints for our visitors here today. We are going to jump, if that's okay with everybody, to item 4.5, the Booster Club Policy Communications Plan. Mr. Petiti has another engagement, so we're going to go first, and then we'll get to Dr. Stevenson. So if you want to come up, Mr. Petiti, and join us, walk us through your plan. And this plan has been developed to help make sure that we are communicating as clearly and consistently, isn't that our motto, clear and consistent communications, as possible with regard to the development of this Booster Club policy, so that everybody knows that we're doing it.
Yes, so thanks for having me, everyone. The plan, as Ms. Coleman stated, was to create a plan that would allow us to go through how we would communicate the development of the booster policy to our parents and other stakeholders who could be affected by the policy. So if you look at the attachment that you received, as well as the PowerPoint on the screens here, you'll see that it's been developed to last from this month through June, which is when we have the policy scheduled to be passed. And it does follow a timeline for, as it should, for the development schedule of the policy and when it will go to the board for first read, for second read, and for possible revisions back to policy, so the communications plan kind of works itself through the development of the policy. The most recent thing that's been done on this plan is inviting the Booster Club members to a meeting to discuss their input and thoughts and feedback on the policy. So I just spoke with Mr. Bechtel, the principal at the high school, and he has helped with a letter, an invitation letter, which you can see in the third row here. 2 booster clubs inviting them to attend these meetings. They've been scheduled 3 meetings, as you can see in the plan item several down, which is week of 319 meetings with booster clubs. There's one on the 21st, there's one on the 22nd, and there'll be one on April 2nd. And that is so booster parents can come out and share their thoughts about policy and development. We also want to make sure we get feedback from coaches and faculty advisors of the clubs that will be affected by the policy. So we're going to work to get a survey together with the high school, and you can see in the owner column all the different parties that will be involved in making these different activities happen. So we'll make sure we get the feedback of our coaches too, in terms of how they interact with booster clubs and those kind of relationships. And then if you just read through the rest, you can see there's mostly updating on the web page that will get done after every meeting, so we can keep the community informed with the progress.
Yes, absolutely.
Michael, thank you. Thank you for the quick overview. It says that the high school administration will be previewing a draft of the proposed booster policy to the booster clubs. So my question is, do we have a copy of the proposed booster policy? Does the committee have it?
Two things. One, it's important to note that this is an evolving document for these exact questions. For two, I believe the thought was, and Dr. Barczyk, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the most value we would get from the booster clubs feedback would be if they are able to see some sort of document that could be a policy, that is a potential policy language, so that they could add to it, say that doesn't really apply, etc. And so that's why we were hoping to have something by that time. So
and that's correct. Mr. Giasio has worked in developing a draft of one,
Great.
based on other districts that we've looked at as well in the past already.
Great, thank you. That's it.
Anybody else have any questions? Andrew, Chuck, Andrea? No? Okay. I have one quick question, and that is, should we be advertising our policy meetings? I know we do that in the Radnor Reader and such, but if we're communicating with booster club presidents about meetings that they're going to be having at the high school, should we also mention that just as an extra, that our policy committee is going to be reviewing those drafts, because maybe they want to hear what the policy committee says, maybe they want to make public comment at our meetings? Is that something
you mean just letting the booster clubs know when the policy is coming before the policy committee?
Exactly.
Sure.
And I know that we advertise that as a matter of course, but a much more intentional notice to the people who would really invested in this policy.
Makes sense.
Okay, so can add that in?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sure that's something we could have at the booster club meeting itself. Let them know of all the available dates
to
and
go
so on.
over with them, at the meetings. But we'll make sure we also get the people that don't attend the meetings too, that might not come to give their feedback.
Okay, great, thank you very much. All right, well then, if nobody else has any questions, we can move along, Mr. Patini, and welcome Dr. Stevenson as we move into our next agenda.
One of the things we just forgot to do was, and I know no one's in the audience, but public comment.
I'm so sorry, that's what happens when you have an empty room. Boom, there goes public
Just
comment.
to make sure we
Yes,
acknowledge.
thank you so much for reminding me. Is there any public comment out there? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 2. Thank you for that oversight.
Okay, as mentioned in our opening comments tonight, we're looking at policy 251, homeless students, and Dr. Stevenson is here with us in the audience tonight, just to make sure if there's any questions or concerns in regards to the policy and the revisions that have been made at this point. There are 2 copies. There's the original with the red line, and then you will see the proposed with the new formatting of the policy itself.
So that was actually going to be my question. Is this what our policies are going to look like now?
Correct.
Oh, I like it better. Okay.
So, and the reason we're doing this, just for clarification, is when we go into board docs with all the tables and everything, it causes formatting issues, so this is going to be the upload into the board docs.
Great,
How
thank you.
it'll look.
All right, so Dr. Stevenson, you want to join us?
Sure.
Hang on. So, it's gonna have a date on it though, right?
Correct. If you look on the last page, it will have at the end adopted March 25th, 2008, and then revised. And then upon the approval.
Would it be a problem to have it on that front page where we used to have it? I say that only because some policies are quite long, and it's actually easier to see at the beginning of a policy
That's an easy shift. We can do
when it was last adopted. Thank you. Sorry.
So Dr. Stevenson is joining us this evening because he is, as you notice in policy 251, we have a district liaison to homeless students, and that liaison is Dr. Stevenson. So in case anybody has any questions about his role or the policy, the administrative regulation, Dr. Stevenson kindly agreed to be here to answer those questions firsthand. Does anybody have any? No?
No?
Do you have any questions for us, Dr. Stevenson?
I do not. I thought it was well done, so thank you for putting this in place. I will say that they are, for the AR social workers, who I would give all the credit for being behind of getting a lot of this work done, working with our homeless students, reviewed this with me, and will be looking at the AR and working with Ed to make just a couple of recommendations, particularly around, including Dr. Warchek, around Title I language and about the procedural piece. But those are things, of course, that we can do. But the policy itself is aligned with the recommendations from the Minto-McKinney Act, and also the guidelines from the Pennsylvania Department of Education's homeless liaison, statewide liaison program. So I think it was well done. Thank you.
Terrific, and I just wanted for the committee's benefit to point out that, and we had put this in your board packets, that we had changed the wording on the AR for the enrollment placement paragraph to address some of the questions around what that actually means that came up at our business meeting this past month. So you'll notice that that wording is shifted in response to a couple board members expressing confusion around who exactly we're servicing by this policy. So I just wanted to make sure that's abundantly clear. All right, well then, terrific.
Thank
2 for 2. Have a nice evening. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
And we're back to our nearly empty room again.
So
So Amy?
Yes.
If there's any more questions about 251
It
from
doesn't sound like it,
many
right?
members?
I hope I'm not overlooking anything, but.
Go ahead, Al.
No, it's just to clarify, so we are gonna put that forward for second reads next week, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the next agenda item is transportation, policy 810. And again, this is another one that we are going to move forward for a second read at next week's meeting, regular business meeting. So you have, again, 2 versions of this. You have the clean version, and then you have the, well, looks like blue line version.
You like blue better, you said. So, we're getting used to that.
So,
Okay.
any questions or comments regarding transportation or 810?
And nothing changed since the first read that happened at the business meeting last month. So we're
Correct.
seeing the same materials, and again, we'd like to push this to second read and adoption at the end of the month, next week. So, anybody have any questions?
No.
3 for 3. We're gonna go out and have a party when we're all done. Okay, so thank you very much for that, and let's move on to item 4.3, policy 206, assignment within district.
So again, you can see there were changes made in regards to this policy. The revisions are in the blue line there. Really, again, there was more up to date in regards to school code and making this up to date.
And we also have tried to group policy work by theme, and when we're working on policies that very clearly impact another policy, we're trying to bring that policy into the review time as well, so that we can clean all that up in one fell swoop. So 206, 251 and 810.
They both impacted
Both
those.
impacted 206. So while we were initially going to revise 206 because of changes to school code, we also realized in doing 251 and 810 that it had implications for 206, and we're addressing those as well. So with that, I will ask if anybody has any questions about 206. Susan, do you?
I do.
Okay.
So my only question is why 206 is still in the old format, the table format? I don't have, it looks like I've got 206 and AR that's in the new version, but not the policy.
The red line version of that, Tony resent out right after our Friday packets arrived. I had looked at the packets and noticed that the red line version of 206, this is a mistaken document that was included, the AR. There was a red lined version of 206 that was not included in your Friday packet, if those are the materials you're looking at.
Yeah.
They were later sent to us by email
Yeah.
from Tony.
Oh,
And
I was away for the weekend,
I'm
so
sorry.
I only got the packet.
I
Okay.
can
No
supply
worries.
you with.
All right, so
Let me
thank
just-
you.
Is it in that packet? Well, Susan gets
So I
that.
think this is, it's not that it's incorrect, it's just, this is
No,
the AR.
Right,
Correct.
and that should not have been in the packet. We weren't looking at the AR. We
Got
were
it,
looking
thank
at
you.
red line. Do you want to take a
But-
moment to look at that?
No, I don't, but it still is in the table format, that's what I'm trying to ask. It hasn't been updated to the new board docs format, is
This
it?
one has not. It will be once we shift to the next
That was my
process.
question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, okay,
But
great.
it will be in the new format.
All right,
And conceptually, what I think may make sense moving forward is when the documents come here prior to going to first read, when there's a lot of language getting moved around, just so that we don't have to make the changes to the chart version, which is the track changes version, and then go incorporate those same changes into the clean version. I'd like to keep everything in the chart format until we're getting ready to go to second reading, and then move everything over into the new format, if that makes sense.
Works for me.
But before we post it, we will put it into the new format.
That's terrific,
And-
but you raised that, Susan, and it's a good opportunity to tell you that you didn't have that document.
right.
And I'm making sure that we get these, Patty's been great with this, putting the boxes on top of every document so we know when the latest version was.
Thank you,
That way-
Patty.
Spin my mother goose on that one. Keep pushing me along.
Okay, terrific. Susan, do you have any other questions on 206, or do you want me to go to some other people and come back to you?
No, come back.
Okay, so let me move over to Andrew. I'll come back this way. I'm gonna do you second to last. Save the second to
However
best
you want
last
to.
for best. The best for second to last.
Okay.
Do you have any questions, Andrew, on 206?
I don't.
Andrea, you're good. Chuck? Susan? Ken? Ed, do you have any questions?
Grant exceptions.
We can give a little background maybe while Susan's reading, and that we had been advised to update 206 some time ago, actually, August 9th, 2016, when Ken Roos was here, and we just hadn't gotten around to it. And those things that he wanted us to incorporate are now going to be part of the AR. We're going, again, with every policy to make them very broad, very brief, and put the teeth into the AR. And some of the things that the only thing in our AR previously was how to assign twins. And we needed to add other things to assignment to district that weren't already either in our existing policy or AR. So some of those things that we added in are the assigned into that policy were, in addition to the placement of twins, wasn't it the other two things?
We have the attendance boundaries, which
Right.
we're referencing. Those boundaries are already on the district's website, and we're simply including a link in the administrative regulation to that section of the website so people can
Right.
see the attendance
Mhm.
boundaries. And the second piece is to include language for the process that parents can follow if they want to seek an exception to an attendance boundary.
Right, right.
And then while we had it open, we added some additional language about homeless students being assigned in accordance with the homeless students policy, and we added a statement that no discrimination will occur in connection with assignment students to specific schools.
Right.
So, the only question I have, thank you, I just read through it quickly, is in the policy where it says twins and higher order multiples shall be assigned to school and class sections in accordance with applicable law, and the accompanying administrative regulation. I mean both, correct?
Correct, and the applicable law is spelled out in the administrative regulation. So
So-
we can add the statement there either as outlined in the accompanying administration or applicable law and administrative regulation, whatever language.
I think we have to reference the AR in the policy because we do spell it out in the AR.
That's true, it is in there, so we need to identify.
Yes, it's, I mean, I don't, is there law behind the placement of twins and higher order multiples?
Yes.
Believe it or not, yes.
Okay, so I would, my suggestion would be to change that last sentence to, in accordance with applicable law and the accompanying administrative regulation.
Got it.
That's the only thing I see. Other than that, it all makes sense to me what you made the changes for. Thank you.
I wanted to point out something else that we're starting to do with our policy formatting, and that is that you'll notice in some of our older policies, we have a jumble of letters and numbers that are kind of unintelligible to most of us, except administrators and solicitors. So when we move to this new format in board docs for our policies, when we do references, we're going to spell out things that are school code, for example. Instead of having the initials SC, we're going to say school code. And when there's a statute from federal law, we will indicate that as well, so that people understand what it is that impacts these policies.
Or in parentheses, put directly where it's coming from. So
Right.
we may have 24 PS section 1310, which is
But we'll put the applicable
law
in there.
following.
Right, right. And we even for our district policies, as you can see on 206, where it says POL 103, that used to be the only reference that would be in the side margin, but now we're listing exactly what the name of that policy is. We really want to make these policies as user-friendly as possible and thought that those would be good modifications.
So Amy, funny you should mention 103. Sort of a volley and serve there. I had a question because when I first looked at the language there about discrimination, I just had a question, what do you mean by discrimination? I looked on the back and it did refer, as you just mentioned, to 103. And so I'm wondering then, are you going to be able to put, could we put right there, referring to policy 103, rather than...
You mean embedded within the policy itself?
Yeah,
As
there's some kind
compared to-
of cross-reference. You know, again, this goes along what we were just talking about how to cross-reference or where to put the cross-reference. But it was just a question that I had when I was reading this of when I saw discrimination, no discrimination shall occur. The question popped into my head: what does that mean, discrimination? But if I go to policy 103, it's very clear. It's very explicit there. It's a 4-page policy on non-discrimination. So just an idea there. Could we put maybe be a little bit more specific in accordance with policy 103, which details what constitutes non-discrimination?
Hey, can I jump in for a second, Andrew, because it actually is bringing up a different question for me. So I understand in the new format, you guys are going to list the cross-references at the end of the policy. The only problem with that, and it kind of piggybacks onto what Andrew is saying, Andrew, we got away from, and I'm noticing that we didn't do it in this one, we've tried to get away from listing the specific policy in text, because when policies change or the cross-referencing changes, you can make a change to the cross-reference without having to redo a first and a second read. Okay. So, but what's confusing is in the old table format, that comment about non-discrimination that's on page 1, the applicable cross-reference policy would have been in the left-hand side, and it's no longer there. And with that, in the last sentence where it says homeless students will be assigned to schools in accordance with policy 251, we've done the exact thing that we were trying to get away from, which is when we list the cross-reference within the text and something about the cross-referencing changes, we have to review, we have to reapprove the policy. And when, this is at least, this was the understanding we had from Mike Christofko, when it's in the body of the text and there's a change, you have to bring it back through for a first and second read, or second read and waive the first and waive the second. And the cross-referencing on the old table format, you didn't have to do that. And maybe you could clarify if that's accurate or not, but to Andrew's point, only listing the cross-references at the bottom, which makes sense when you read the new board docs format. It does make cross-referencing, what part of this policy is cross-referenced with the other policy?
Can I?
Sure.
Wait, can we get a mic for Patty, maybe?
Oh, wait a second, I know what you're gonna say.
Actually, in the board docs, where it's cross-referenced, there's the little square boxes and then a number. And then that number is next to the cross-reference at the bottom.
Okay, so the online user version of board docs is easier.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And I pulled up an example
Oh, thank
from
you.
another school district that uses board docs that happens to be one of my clients, just to illustrate this. So when you move to board docs, this area up here, which gives the name of the policy, the date that it was last revised, this is standard. That's embedded in part of
Okay,
the
good.
template. So like you mentioned earlier, the dates will be at the top.
Okay, great.
As we scroll through this policy, and I picked 206, for example, there's a sentence right here, and you see how there's the hyperlink here to number 1. All the cross-references are listed at the bottom. So number 1 here is section 1310 of the public school code. But as you read this policy, you can click on number 1 here, and this will take you right to section 1310.
Oh, well, that's nice.
So,
an advantage for board docs.
so once we move to, once the district moves to board docs, all of
No,
this will
the
be
districts
much
moved
easier.
to board docs, but the policies aren't yet in there.
Right, and that's
Got
another
it, thank
project
you.
we're working on.
All right, got it, thank you. So Andrew, I think that takes care of your concern and mine.
Mhm.
Perfect,
Sure.
great,
Yep.
thank you,
You asked for
Ed.
beer and you got champagne.
I never asked for beer. Patty, thank you for that, appreciate that help with that. Oh, well, hang on a second, then that even further says to me we should take out the text. The last sentence, homeless students will be assigned to schools in accordance with policy and applicable law, board policy and applicable law, and take out the 251 because it will already have
Yes,
its own
yes.
little
Number.
Yes.
hyperlink to
Correct.
251.
Correct.
Yes.
So I guess that'd be the second suggestion I'd make then. It should be in accordance with board policy and applicable law. All right, great, thank you.
Okay, and the administrative regulation for 206, what's the status of that?
Right now, that is actually in development because we are adding to the other 2 pieces.
And it's nearing completion.
It's near completion, yes.
Great.
So what we'd like to do with this is send it for a first read. Now, originally we had thought about first read, waive second, adopt. Do you still feel like we need to go through 2 months of this? You said there had been a fair number of changes.
Given the extent of these changes, I would recommend doing 2 readings. And by the time we get to a second reading, the AR will be done.
Okay.
And we can post both the policy and the AR at the same time if the committee's
We
comfortable.
love that, thank you. Does that sound good to everybody? So 206 we'll have a very long policy thing going on for next week. So, okay, terrific, thank you. So let's move on to 4.4, terroristic threats and acts, it should say, actually. That's the name of the policy, is it not?
Yes.
Okay,
So this is for our final agenda item this evening. Again, this was out of changes in school code, as well as in light of certain situations. We just want to make sure that we're covering our bases and having a very comprehensive policy that we can follow to ensure that we're making the right decisions when it comes to any this type of situation.
and I just wanted to add that this is one of a few more policies that we need to update based on changes that occurred to school code back in
Correct.
November. So tentatively for April's agenda, you'll see the remainder of those policies. We just got to terrorist acts and threats and acts first. So with that, does anybody on the board have any questions about the changes to that policy? Just want to contextualize it to say that, again, you'll notice that we are moving to that big, brief, broad policy format, and having all of the cross out is because it's being moved into an AR. Any specific questions though, Susan?
Office of Safe Schools, is that just something that's known in the PDE world?
Yes.
Great, okay, that was my only question.
Andrew? Andrea? Chuck?
No, I just need to fix my pen died.
Right?
Should we do some work for April and get it out of the way?
Sometimes it goes this way and we can end early, it's
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know, but hold on to your seats, buckle your seatbelts, right?
That's it.
So, okay, so 218.2 is going to go also to the board for a first read. The administrative regulation, is that kind of the same thing as 206, which by the time it comes back
Correct.
in April for its second read, that'll be ready too?
And again, there were a lot of changes, so we
Right.
wanted to make sure that all of those were captured and everyone had the opportunity to clearly review those.
Okay, terrific. Well then, carry on. We're moving on to that one. Okay. Boy, we're moving so fast, I can't keep track of my agenda here. Hold on a second.
We're done.
All right, 4.5, we're done. And of course, I would invite public comment, would be new business, anybody? New business? No?
We're done.
Okay. All right, I know. You're dismissed early. You can go.
I'd like to
Okay.
just thank Dr. Barczyk and Ed, the two of them, Ed and Tony, thank Ed and Tony for all they're doing to organize this and as we move forward. And I think the results of a productive meeting is all the planning that takes place beforehand, so thank you.
And I also want to speak to, I should have mentioned it at the.
And to the chair as well.
Thank
you.
No, it had nothing to do with it. The flow chart that Tony's putting together, I think, really, I hope you guys caught that we are going to try to memorialize process for policy from soup to nuts, including implementation and dissemination of policy for, time to come. So thank you for taking that on as well. All right, so with all that, I say adios, amigos, and we'll see you in April.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
And it's
still light out.
Bye.
Yeah, it's-